Welcome to the Indy Drills podcast, where we talk exclusively defensive back play. And I'm happy to be here joining you. I'm your host, Chad Wilson. And some stuff to get into today. Obviously, we start things off with the news, just a couple of items here, I think big time there. Then we're going to talk about the debate, speed turns versus hip flips. I have some interesting thoughts on that. Got into some things on Twitter. And I found it to be interesting, so we're going to get into that today. Of course, we'll go into the mailbag. Got one from across the pond. The UK has checked into the mailbag, so happy to take that, and then we'll close out with our main topic, which is doing this with your eyes will definitely lead to you making more plays out there in the secondary. So I will uncover exactly what that is on the show today. So happy to be, again, joining you here and with another edition of the Indy Drills podcast. If this is your first time here or you have been coming and you've neglected to do this, feel free to go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next time I put out a great Indy Drills DB podcast like this one. Let's jump into the news. We got some good news. My last time that I was on here, I was stressing a little bit about how seemingly defensive backs were becoming less important in the grand scheme of things in the NFL. And I know how these things can trickle down from the top. So if if they're making them or seemingly making them less important at the highest level of the NFL, that stuff will start to trickle down into the lower levels, college, high school, et cetera, et cetera. And not only do I think that's a mistake, I feel like that's just a bad thing. So, on the heels of me saying that, we did have a contract that was signed. Antoine Winfield Jr. Signed a new contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, arguably one of the best safeties over the last 2-3 years in the league. Certainly last year got hosed on some accolades, but we know we know all the politics involved in that. Financially wise, taken care of by the Tampa Bay Bucs. The new deal is going to have him at roughly $21 million a year. 45 million of that is guaranteed. And, looking at the deal that he signed, just got me to thinking about, how are guys paid in the NFL? So I came up with a list here because we're going to go by money, because in this league, they put their money where their mouth is and vice versa. That's really how this thing works. So in order of importance, and we're just basically breaking this down by how players are paid. We're talking about highest players paid in the league. I'm going to show you just how the league feels about their position players and where defensive backs fit in. Obviously, number one highest paid position in the league is quarterback. Joe Burrow's contract has him at $62.9 million a year. But who follows that? The highest paid player after that is an edge player. That's Nick Bosa, I believe. And forgive me if I don't have all of the players' names right here in front of me. We're just going by position here anyway, at $34.7 million. So our quarterbacks, top paid $62.9, edge, Nick Bosa, $34.7. After that, surprisingly, or maybe not, to some of you out there, is wide receiver at $32 million. I believe that's A.J. Brown, $32 million. He's $84 guaranteed. After that, as we may have started to notice in this last NFL draft, is defensive tackle at $31.7. That's Chris Jones, I believe, from the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, and so far this makes sense. And we see some equality there. Offensive player, defensive player, offensive player, defensive player. We're back to offense, and, if you're going to pay your quarterback like that, you got to have some protection for him. So the next highest paid position is offensive tackle, left tackle. I believe that's Penei Sewell at $28 million. Surprising to me was the next position, which is guard at $21.8 million. Don't have that player's name in front of me. I believe it's Green Bay Packer. Again, apologize for not having that for you. Tied with that. All right, tied with that now is where the cornerbacks come in, and that's at $21.8 million. Currently, that is Jair Alexander. He is at $21.8 million per year. The highest total guaranteed, though, at the cornerback position is Denzel Ward at 71.25. So we get down to the sixth position out there before a cornerback shows up. And then, of course, now with Antoine Winfield signing this contract, DBs now come in at seven. Safeties come in at seven at $21 million a year, as I mentioned. Antoine Winfield Jr. is set to make with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Rounding things out, outside linebackers or off the ball linebackers, $20 million a year. Running back, 17.2. That's Christian McCaffrey. Tight end is 10th, 17.1. That's Travis Kelce. Then we've got center at 14 mil, kicker at 6.2, punter at 3.9. That's how it shakes out. So only thing I really have issue with is the gap between wide receiver and cornerback is $11 million. Yeah, that's how they view it. It's all about those fantasy points and getting those points on the board, isn't it? But we're not going to trip too hard off of that. Also in the news, highly touted and spoken about defensive back Cormani McLean, who was a 5-star cornerback coming out of high school, ended up in Colorado with Deion Sanders. Seemed like a really, really great idea. It was an awesome pairing of cornerbacks. You were going to have Travis Hunter on one side, Cormani McLean on the other side, and things quite didn't shake out the way that I believe both McLean and Colorado and Coach Prime wanted it to work out. There was a lot of talk during the season about why Cormani wasn't playing, and Deion had got on and said he's, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, not doing the things that he needs to do, apparently both on and off the field, to be a regular contributor. And so, things never really got better there. He did play in some games, unremarkable. But again, a freshman, didn't quite do what Travis Hunter did as a freshman. But, Travis Hunter's a unique individual. And so things didn't really work out for Cormani McLean at Colorado. And he had to hit the road, as they say. So entered the transfer portal, as many, many kids do nowadays. And there was a lot surrounding that. The Colorado Buffalo fan base has worked itself into quite the mafia on social media. So, anytime someone's going after the team, any of the Sanders boys, Coach Prime, or they decide to transfer and have something to say about it, the Colorado faithful do get in there. So they were on Cormani McLean's case within those first 48, 72 hours since he announced that he was going into the transfer portal, and there was some back and forth going on there. Ultimately, though, we do have a destination for Cormani McLean, and not really too surprised he ends up at Florida. The surprise here is that he's not going to be on scholarship. And this is not a recruiting show, so I'm not going to get deep into this. Because we have NIL now, we can see where there can be some things jimmied up. And yes, you're not on the scholarship books, but you have an NIL deal that will pay for your tuition. See how that whole thing works. And on the heels of that, and again, this is not a recruiting show. I do have the Gridiron Stud show for that, and the Two Chumps football podcast that I do with Emil Calamino, where we would talk more about that stuff. But this has led the NCAA to really explore into the whole idea of a walk-on, because technically that's what Cormani McLean is going to be. Actually, taking a page out of Deion Sanders' book. Deion Sanders last year at Florida State, he was not on scholarship. However, his tuition was paid for by his minor league baseball contract that he had. Now, because he had signed a baseball contract, he could no longer be on scholarship because that was the rules in the NCAA at the time. So, Deion being Deion and being a pioneer, decided to take the baseball contract, still stay at Florida State because, he couldn't leave early at that time. So his scholarship was paid for by, I believe, the New York Yankees. That's the farm system that he was in. That's the team that he signed the scholarship with. The contract with, and that's who paid. So fast forward to Cormani McLean here in 2024. He is classified as a walk-on, so his tuition is not paid by the school, but it is alleged that he has an NIL deal that will take care of that. And as you can see, the NCAA is worried about that. They see this as possibly going to be a trend where you can have more scholarship players who aren't on scholarship. So you can expand your rosters. You can have players who are scholarship worthy, not on scholarship, and they can have their tuition paid for by NIL deals, by boosters, et cetera, et cetera. So what we have here is the NCAA considering to get rid of walk-ons. Now, I don't need to tell you how, much of a problem that's going to be for guys that are not 4- and 5-star recruits. A lot of guys get their intro, get their opportunity in college football by being a walk-on, and because we have these things happening, there's a chance that those things are going to be pulled away from those types. A lot of what we see transitioning and taking place in college football, and let's be honest, over the last 5-6 years, this has probably been the most changes in college football that we've seen. A lot of these things are hurting the players that are in the middle, just like almost everything that we have going on in this country right now. All of the massaging and maneuvering at the top has hurt the middle. And so, like I said, guys who would be fringe players, who would like to be preferred walk-ons, etc., whatever, not quite scholarship players in the eyes of the school. I'm not talking like a Cormani McLean where they, are really, really wanted, if I can use that term, but guys who are trying to get an opportunity, trying to give coaches a better look, a more long-term look in hopes of getting a scholarship, are potentially going to get hurt here. So something for us to keep an eye on. But the real news here for us on the Indy Drills podcast is Cormani McLean is going to be a Florida Gator. All right, moving on to the next topic. Listen, if you thought there was only a debate, well, listen, if you're a defensive back or defensive back coach, there's a lot of things that get debated. Where to have your eyes in press, where to have your hands, soft press technique versus hard press technique. DB coaches love to argue. That's just what we do. Nevertheless, I got wrapped up a little bit into a discussion on my Twitter account, DB Tips 101. By the way, on X, keep saying Twitter. Am I supposed to change over to X? Am I supposed to be saying that? I came into this thing as Twitter, so I'm probably going to keep saying that, just like I keep saying Washington Redskins. Have a hard time calling those guys the Commanders, so you'll have to forgive me. Every now and then I'll say San Diego Chargers as well. But into this debate a little bit back and forth as to whether or not speed turns are a good thing. And this was really this really was started by Darius Slay, which is not fair to be having this debate with him, because he's probably as good a speed turner as there is in this league. Quite frankly, he probably has the best feet of a defensive back in this league, even in year 11 or 12. I think that he's in really, really great feet. It's the best thing that he has working for him as a defensive back, and it's done him very well. Now, he has these elite feet, and so he feels very comfortable executing the speed turns, and so he's a lover of speed turns. I personally, if you've come to my sessions, if you have spent any amount of time on alleyersdbcamp.com or in my members area or whatever, I'm not a fan of speed turns. I know they need to happen at times. When I say I'm not a fan of speed turns, I'm not a fan of going about and teaching them, or really spending any amount of time in practice going over speed turns. And my reasoning for that is, I have found in my coaching and training career that once you start teaching this and you make this a regular part of a player's routine, they tend to overuse them. All right. And then you start seeing speed turns unnecessarily at the line of scrimmage and press. I think it allows players to feel like they can just be out of position because I do have the speed turn at my disposal. I'll give you an analogy here. Do we not see players less the decision on where they're going to school and how they pick schools when they're going from high school to college? That I feel like there's less importance placed on that decision because they have the transfer portal there to bail them out if they made a wrong decision. And this is kind of how I feel about the speed turns. You start teaching players these speed turns, and they are less, the actual beginning technique becomes less important to them because they will have this speed turn to bail out. Now they start using it way too much. First of all, a speed turn, in my opinion, is an emergency move. When you have ended up in bad position, so you did something wrong, or the wide receiver outmaneuvered you and put you in a bad position, this is when you used speed turn. So it's really an emergency move. And me personally, and this could be a function of me also being a guy who had great feet, I don't feel like this is something that really needs to be practiced a whole bunch. It's an emergency move, kind of a natural thing. In all of my years of training and coaching, it is the more natural thing for the player to spin around to get his head to the other side than it is for him to execute a hip flip. I am more in the park of teaching players two things. First, being in the proper position so you're not going to need to spin around. That's number one. Number two is executing a hip flip so that you can keep your eyes on the person that you are covering. I've shown plenty of video examples of why I don't like the speed turns. In a nutshell, it's basically you flipping yourself all the way around and you now have your back to a guy that you're trying to cover. Now, if he ends up going to the side that you believe that he's going to, so if you're looking at him on your left side and he goes to the other side of you and you speed turn and get your head around to the right and he's there, okay, maybe things work out. If he's breaking the route off, that is a whole bunch of extra steps you're going to have to take. But even if we're talking about going vertical, if you're looking at him on the left, he goes to your right and you spin to your right and he's there, all good. What happens when you get a player like an Antonio Brown that is very skilled in manipulating you, you have him on the left, he jabs to the right, you spin your head around to the right, and he's not there because he went back left. And God forbid if the route breaks off. This happens far too often. And if you're doing this at the line of scrimmage, it happens quite a bit. You start spinning around at the line of scrimmage, guys as wide receiver will play around behind your back and will lose you. And I have found that when you teach the speed turn and you start making it a regular part of the routine, guys rely on it too much. Now they're not doing the right things with their shoulder at the beginning of a press rep, or if a guy's coming off them on off man, they're not focused on having themselves in the right position because the speed turn is available to them because that's kind of what's practiced. You are going to do what it is that you practice. If you're practicing speed turns, you're going to want to do them a whole bunch. And again, it's an emergency move. If you're executing more than 2 speed turns in a game, in my opinion, then you're getting worked. You're getting worked by these wide receivers. And if the wide receiver is worth a damn at all, he is going to manipulate you out of those speed turns. He's going to win more times than not. So if you go into a game and you've speed turned 5 times, I'm here to tell you, more than likely, that receiver is beating you 3 or 4 times out of those speed turns. Do they look pretty? Yes. When you make a play out of a speed turn, does it look great? Yes, I cannot deny. It really does look awesome. But in my opinion, they are fool's gold. You are better off learning how to be in a proper position versus a wide receiver, having your shoulder in the proper place, and when he tries to get to your blind spot, execute a hip flip. On my Twitter account, when we're having this debate, I showed 2 examples. Now, it was an example of being taken advantage of in when executing a speed turn. And it was, I think, really the last ball that was thrown to Antonio Brown. It was in the famous game where he stripped his, basically stripped down to his pants and waved and ran off the field there as a member of the Bucs when they were playing the New York Jets. And I believe this was the last pass that he caught from Tom Brady, but just totally manipulated the defensive back from the Jets that was trying to execute speed turns and get his head around and find Antonio Brown on the other side. This is more typical of what will happen. Now, I've also posted a play that really got a lot of looks with Darius Slay in a back pedal, and the receiver's climbing on him, and he's had the receiver to his outside. The guy made a dig break and he spun around and made the play. It's great. Again, Darius Slay has tremendous feet and can get in and out of breaks really, really fast. He ended up making the play. Two things. First of all, that's more of a situation in which you would execute a speed turn when a wide receiver is climbing on you. He's been running 10, 15 yards or more. He has a tremendous amount of speed going forward. You can only go so fast in a back pedal, and now he has gone to your blind spot. And executing a hip flip at that point in time is probably going to take some steps away from you, and you may end up in a trail position. That is the best time, if you're going to use a speed turn, to use it. Execute the speed turn so you can keep your speed, keep yourself going backwards, and you can get back onto the wide receiver's head. That's probably the best time. Using it at the line of scrimmage, to me, is just an absolute complete no-no. I just really hate it there. First of all, neither one of you or the wide receiver are really moving at any kind of speed. You shouldn't be spinning around, and just the potential for you to be manipulated and have that receiver go one way and then the other while your back is turned is too great. And now you're defeated at the line of scrimmage, and everything after that is just going to be a horror show. It's just going to be you playing catch up. Nevertheless, getting back to what I said, I showed the video of the Jets wide receiver being taken advantage of by Antonio Brown as he went into his blind spot like 2 or 3 times, as the Jets wide receiver spun around several times and never really found Antonio Brown until it was too late. I contrasted that with Antonio Brown's rep against Jason Verrett, which is quite popular now. Antonio Brown with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jason Verrett when he was with the San Diego Chargers at the time, and Jason Verrett, one of the better DBs in this league that I just feel horrible for because of the rash of injuries. But he is executing hip flips. It's a press situation. Again, you can go to my account, DB Tips 101, and you can find it there. And he's jamming him. And as Antonio Brown does what it is he likes to do, try to find the blind spot of the defensive back, he is hip flipping, seeing him and jamming. He's giving him a hand to the chest every time. If you're doing speed turns, there's no hand to the chest. Your back is to the wide receiver. So I've said all that to say you should focus more on being in the proper position. That you should spend your time training that, being in the proper position, and then on that proper position when the wide receiver is trying to do the thing that they do, which is get into your blind spot. They know there are not eyes behind your head. You now execute hip flips so you can keep your eye on that wide receiver. I also like hip flips when, down the field. But as I said, when you get in a situation, especially if you're a safety covering a slot, and these slot guys are really, really quick, and they're, blazing at you, and they've gotten really, really close to you. All right. They're about 5 yards or so away from you, or maybe even less. And they duck behind your back. I get it. You're going to execute a speed turn. I'm not in the camp of you practicing these speed turns. It's a emergency move. It's a no shit move, basically. All right. And so you don't need a ton of practice with that. Spin your head around, get your body around, and get yourself out of that bad situation. So that's the camp that I'm in. Having said all of that, if I'm a coach, especially coaching at the upper levels, I'm in the NFL, or I'm in college, and I've got a seasoned veteran player that's really good, A, at executing speed turns, B, at knowing when to execute speed turns, I'm not probably going to bother him about it. If I've got a less experienced player or a player who's not really good, feet aren't really fast enough to be executing those speed turns, I'm going to probably strongly discourage him from executing the speed turns. And I may have those same 2 players on my football team. And while everyone said, oh, everything should be equal, no, there's no equality. If you ever listen to Jimmy Johnson, says there's no equality. He once cut a guy for sleeping in a meeting. And Michael Irvin, sleeping in a meeting, he was asked what would he do if Michael Irvin fell asleep in a meeting. He said he would wake Michael up. That's just how the world works. Okay. Producers get leeway, non-producers, you hit the road. Okay. So be a producer. But nevertheless, if I've got a guy that can execute him and who knows when to do it, I'd leave him alone until there's a problem. If I've got a guy that's not really good at it, and or he doesn't know when to use them, he's using them too much, he's relying on them too much, I'm going to strongly discourage that guy from doing it. Either way, though, it would not be a regular part of my practice schedule. Whether guys know how to do it or not. It's not really something I'm going to have them do. I'm more apt to really drill into their heads how to stay in the proper position and how to execute the hip thrust. That's just my opinion on things. You guys can hit the comments and let me know how you feel about speed turns, and we could possibly debate that here. But that's just my whole thought process on speed turns versus hip flips. All right, digging into the All Eyes DB Camp mailbag. This one, like I said in the outset, comes from across the pond. Desmond in the UK says, I feel like my feet are slow. What is a drill I can do to speed up my feet? By the way, this is something I commonly get in my DMs and emails that I get. People asking for a drill to speed up their feet or a drill to get better in another drill. Desmond, my answer is simple. Those of you that have been around me already know what's coming, but the best way to speed up your feet as a DB is to do DB drills, okay? I don't have some secret drill for you. There is no secret drill for you that's going to speed your feet up. What you want to do is have your feet fast doing DB things, okay? This position is a bunch of repetitive moves. You're backpedaling. You're pressing and kick sliding. You are hip flipping your hips. God forbid you're speed turning, but it's repetitive moves over and over and over. Outside of your basic warm-up ladder drills, which I have talked about in, I do have a video on my YouTube channel for All Eyes DB Camp. There's a link in the description. You can find it there, or in the bio, you can find it there. Other than those very basic drills, I'm not a big ladder guy. All right, use it for a warm-up. And I don't have these secret drills involving cones or bands or anything like that. That's just not what's going to get you there. They're fancy. They seem like they're secretive, so you're getting something that maybe others aren't, so you're going to secretly get faster and have quicker feet than everybody. But that's a fool's goal, all right? What you should concern yourself more with is doing DB drills. Get better at your DB drills. All right. I have a core of drills. It's called Masters of the Basics. I have a version 1, 2, and 3 that you could find. Part 1 is on my YouTube channel. Parts 2 and 3 are in my members area. But you want to get better at DB drills. So you'll speed your feet up by executing those core DB drills the way that they need to be executed. First of all, starting with your back pedal. One of the couple of the biggest things that I find with guys when they are young defensive backs and they're backpedaling is A, picking their heels up too high, B, too much arm action. They're throwing their elbows back in their back pedal like this. All right, I understand you got to have really good arm motion when you are running forward. When you're running forward, there is a longer cycle in how your foot moves from the floor back up through the cycle, back down to the floor. So you need more arm action. When you're backpedaling, think about it, your feet are touching the ground more often. You cannot have this vigorous elbow throwing arm motion in your back pedal and expect your feet to move fast. All right. If you're sending your arm through this long motion in your back pedal, your feet are not going to tap the ground fast. And that's where the speed in your back pedal comes from. Tapping the ground quickly. All right. Going backwards is different than going forward. So you guys that think if I push my arms really hard in my back pedal, then I will gain ground. No, you're not going to be fast in your back pedal. It's tapping your feet on the ground. So that means you're going to have less arm motion, minimal arm motion. It's really just going to be hand motion. Shouldn't be a whole lot going on with your elbows. And, you know, for those of you that are listening to this on a podcast streaming device, sorry, I don't have video for you, but just try to imagine what I'm saying. There really should be only movement with the forearms, and it's got to be quick, almost like a drummer on the drums. That's how your hands are going to move. And so your feet can tap the ground quickly, and that's going to give you the speed in your back pedal. The other part is having a foot close to the ground allows you to be able to come in and out of breaks when the unexpected happens. You don't always know when the wide receiver is going to break. So having a foot close to the ground and not high up off the ground allows you to have a foot put in the ground quickly when you need to change direction. I'm just talking about back pedal. So you should be really focused on speeding up your feet in your drills and just being able to execute them quickly. Coming out of your breaks. A lot of guys come out of their breaks spreading their feet really wide or stepping way out of their circle. That's going to make you feel slower. First of all, it takes a while for you to put that foot back there. Second of all, your feet are going to be really wide apart, and now you've got to push to get your weight back over that front foot that's way out in front. As that back foot is way in the back, you're going to feel slow coming out of your breaks. If you can get to a point where you practice planting under your hips, so your feet are right up under you and they're hitting that ground quick, you plant them, replace them, and drive out, your feet are going to start to feel quicker. If you're talking about a kick slide or a shuffle, you don't want to take big steps. Again, don't want to have your heels high up off the ground. You want to focus on taking tiny steps. Doing these things and executing them over and over and over and practicing them are going to make your feet faster. You're going to feel faster. You're going to come out of those breaks faster, pedal faster, kick slide faster. So really what it just boils down to is you repetitively doing your DB drills and executing them the right way. And if you're a guy that does a lot of drill work by himself, take a camera out there with you. We're living this lovely time where everything can be filmed, including ourselves. So you take a camera out there, you set it up on a tripod, you film yourself doing these drills, and you really analyze how you're executing them, and you just keep striving to get better and better than everything you keep seeing on that film each week. All right. Next week, you're going to look better on film than you did last week. And I guarantee you, you're going to have faster feet and you're going to feel faster coming out. All right. So again, I appreciate the question, Desmond. For you guys that are out there and that have questions about playing DB, and I'm sure that you do, you can either send me an email to cwilson@alliesdbcamp.com. Again, that's cwilson@alliesdbcamp.com with your question. Or if you're watching here on YouTube, you can go ahead and drop your question down in the comments section. Who knows? I might hit your question on the next episode of the Indy Drills podcast. So go ahead and fire away on those questions. All right, time now for our main topic, and that is we're talking about our eyes today. You know, look, it's all eyes DB camp, all right? I feel like that's a really big part of playing this position, probably the biggest part of this position. As I always tell guys that come and train with me, you could play this game with a sprained ankle. You can play this game with a cast on your arm, but if something goes wrong with your eyes, you get poked in an eye, if you've got double vision, or God forbid, you've got partial vision, you're not going to be very good playing. So that just, goes to show you that your eyes are the most important thing that you have when you're playing defensive back. All right. And so I do a lot of focusing on the eyes when trying to get guys to play better. And here's one thing that I have found that gives guys a lot more success. And it's something that's very subtle. It's very difficult for guys to understand, because here's the problem with eyes. You can kind of feel your feet. You can see your feet. You can, feel your hands, obviously see your hands when you're in the middle of a practice session or you're playing in the games. You can evaluate that. You cannot see your eyes. That's the hard part. And so it's very hard to evaluate what is happening with your eyes, which is, tough, because the problems you have with your feet and your hands a lot of times starts with what's going on with your eyes. So what I'm going to talk about here to close out the show really involves your eyes and how to really use your eyes to help yourself make plays. We all know that playing DB is, about quick reactions and timing. If you hesitate, if you think too long, you fail to read a key, the offense is going to have success. Your ability to process is everything. And there's one surefire way for you to speed up that process. If you've played any amount of man-to-man, you're aware of the importance of focusing. But what does that really mean? There's a saying that goes, see a little, you see a lot. See everything, then you see nothing. This couldn't apply more than in what I'm going to talk about here to close out the show. To have quick reaction times, you must first read a key when you're out on the field. If you're playing press man, then, you're looking at the hip, most likely, as that's what's most commonly taught. If you're playing zone coverage, then you're either required to see another receiver or read the quarterback. But let's go further than that. Oftentimes when we're keying something, we may be seeing it, but we're also seeing everything else around it. So sure, we're looking at the hips of the receiver and press, but are we seeing both hips? the stomach of the receiver, and maybe even the thighs as we're trying to look at those hips. So yes, we're seeing the hips, but are we seeing a bunch of other things too? So do we need to see the hips? I think it's better for us to just see the hip as opposed to both hips. I tell guys when I'm training them, look at that near hip. So if you're playing outside leverage, we need to have laser focus on the receiver's outside hip. If there's a logo or any kind on the receiver's pants, put your focus on that. I love when there's a logo there. This will keep you from seeing his belt, his stomach, the bottom of his shirt, or anything else that will distract you. Again, you need to have a laser focus. So let's imagine a baseball player trying to hit a 95-mile-per-hour fastball. As he sees the ball, plus the pitcher and the center field off in the distance, he's not going to hit that baseball. All right. Instead, batters at the highest levels are focusing on the spin of the ball. They're trying to see the laces on the ball revolving, God knows at what speed that's coming in at. This gives them a laser focus on this singular object, the ball. This is the only way that they will have a chance to put a piece of wood shaped in a cylinder on a ball moving seemingly at the speed of light. I would encourage you guys to go to a Major League Baseball game in person to see just how fast that ball is coming in. In the same thought, it's really important for us to take this same approach when we're playing defensive back. I've often said playing defensive back and press man coverage is very similar to standing in a batter's box and hitting a baseball. You've got to touch something that's moving pretty fast. If you're required to read the quarterback in zone coverage, take a laser focus on what is important. It's the front shoulder, since that oftentimes leads to where that quarterback is throwing. So if we focus on that, we're going to be in really good position. You don't want to see the quarterback and his 5 offensive linemen along with the back. You don't want to see everything going on in that backfield. That's going to slow down your read on what the quarterback is doing. Let's think about this. What if you're required to read the number 2 receiver in a zone coverage, which is happening more and more with kind of coverages that are coming out? It's not enough just to see the whole receiver plus everything else immediately around them. Look at the near hip of the number 2 receiver. See a little so that you can see a lot. If where that receiver goes is what matters, then narrow down your focus to just him. And you can do that by honing your vision in on a small part of his body. Now, having said that, there may be some instances where you need to get a wider picture of what's going on. In those cases, it's not likely that you need to have a very quick reaction. When it's required for you to have wide vision, it's most likely because you need to see a play develop and gradually make your way to a landmark or to a player that may be coming from one area into yours. Now, in those cases, a laser focus would not be the move to make. However, when there is one thing to focus on, use this technique to have quicker reactions, better jumps on the ball, and to make more plays. So that laser focus is really, really going to help you guys. It's something that's going to have to be practiced, and you're going to have to be conscious and aware of it, both in your training and practice sessions. And a lot of guys just really don't think too much about this. A lot of times you're thinking about your hands and your feet, but get into now of a laser focus, because I'm here to tell you, your eyes going to help your feet. All right. Seeing things quicker allow your feet to move faster. All right. Your brain is going to send messages to your feet. Where do they get those first messages from? Through your eyes. Your eyes sends data to your brain. Your brain is going to send it to your feet, and that's how you react. If your eyes are not getting the proper information, it's sending the wrong data to your brain, and in turn, that bad data is going to be sent to your feet, and now you're going to be late reacting. So if you find yourself as a guy that's reacting later to things, you find yourself a little bit delayed, it's not your feet. Start with your eyes. What are you seeing? Are you seeing too much? If you're required to see one thing, really shrink your focus on that one thing. Yes, I need to see the number 2 receiver. Do I need to see his whole body? Yes, I need to press and see this receiver in front of me. Keep my eyes on my man. Do I need to see the whole man, or do I need to just see his hip? Is he going to go somewhere without his hip? He's not. If he does, we've got a phenomenon. We need to get cameras in there and fill a whole TV show on it, or call the police. This is an alien. Bring your focus into a small part. Get laser focused. Watch your reactions are end up being a whole lot quicker. And reactions is all the T. It's everything at the defensive back position. All right. So I hope that helped you guys out. Once again, on the way out, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, to this show. If you're listening to me on the podcast streamer, go ahead and hit the subscribe button there so you don't miss out on the next one. Also, listen, talk about it all the time. This show is sponsored by the 101 DB Tips. Every defensive back and defensive back coach should own a copy of this book. All right, just about everything that you need to know as a defensive back. It's the ultimate reference guide: how to play man, how to play zone, how to play corner, nickel, safety, how to train in the offseason, watch film. It's all covered in there. So you should own a copy of this. It's available in softback, or if you want it immediately and you're a guy that likes it on your phone or your iPad, you can get the ebook version of it. We will have links to it in the description down below. So definitely get your hands on that 101 DB Tips. It will help you tremendously. All right, that's it for me and this Indy Drills podcast. Thank you guys for listening. And until next time, all eyes DB camp. Consistency breeds results.